They say you remember everything about your wedding day. The scent of your bouquet, the weight of the dress, the first tear that slips down your cheek before the ceremony even begins. I remember the silence. Not the kind filled with peace or reverence, but the thick, suffocating kind that presses against your ribs. It came the moment I realized she wasn't coming. The sun was pouring through the arched windows of the bridal suite at Ravencrest Vineyards, casting golden beams over soft ivory lace, champagne flutes, and peonies so fresh they still held morning dew. My bridesmaids were flitting in and out of the room, adjusting hairpins, steaming dresses, laughing too loudly in that way people do when they're trying to fill space. But all I could hear was the silence where her voice should have been. My name is Serena Kim. I'm 32. And today I was supposed to marry the love of my life with my best friend, my chosen sister, standing right next to me. Kim Sun-cho wasn't just my maid of honor. She was the person I once promised would be in the delivery room when I had my first child. The one who knew the name of my childhood imaginary horse. The one who once held my hair back in a Taco Bell bathroom at 2 a.m. and told me I deserved better. She'd been the first person I called when Dean proposed. She was the second name on the RSVP list. First row. White floral dress. Custom silk robe with her initials embroidered in sage thread to match the theme. And now she was gone. No call. No explanation. No voice. Just a text. 4 words. Can't make it. Sorry. That was it. No punctuation. No heart emoji. Not even a name attached. Just a block of silence inside my phone. I must have read it 20 times before my fingers began to shake. It came through 28 minutes before the ceremony. My makeup artist was smoothing the final line of my eyeliner when the notification buzzed. She asked if I wanted to read it later. I didn't answer. I just stared. It didn't make sense. He was in town. She'd landed 2 days ago. She'd helped me write my vows just last night, sprawled across my hotel bed, barefoot and humming softly to the playlist we made in college. I still remember her words. Serena, if you ever get cold feet, I'll drag you down the aisle myself. So why was I standing in the middle of this room, clutching a phone like it was a detonator? My maid of honor dress was still hanging on the wardrobe door. Untouched like me, like every part of my heart that expected today to unfold perfectly. The others didn't know yet. My bridesmaids were still whispering about whether my cousin's ex was hot or pathetic. My mom was in the hallway arguing about the gluten-free dessert options with the venue coordinator. Dean was probably smiling somewhere, pacing outside, oblivious to the fact that the one person I trusted above all others had just disappeared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to move. So I did what Kim Sun and I always did when the world didn't make sense. I sat on the floor. Dress pulled around me like a puddle of dreams. Peonies in my lap. Phone clutched tight in my hand like I could somehow squeeze the truth out of it. I should have felt panic, but instead there was something heavier. Something uglier. This wasn't just about a no-show. This wasn't just a bad day. This was a rupture. A betrayal I couldn't yet name. Because deep down I knew her. He would never do this. Not without a reason. Unless this had been building for longer than I realized. A cold thought crept into my spine, something I hadn't let myself consider until that moment. What if this wasn't out of character? What if I just hadn't been paying attention? The door creaked open behind me. I didn't lift my head. Serena. It was Lena, one of my bridesmaids, her voice gentle and cautious, like I was a glass she didn't want to drop. Guests are starting to arrive. We've got 20 minutes. You okay? I heard the click of her heels stop. Silence again. Then the shift in her tone as she must have seen my face. What happened? I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, full of words I hadn't formed yet. Instead I turned the phone toward her. Let her see. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. That's from Kim Sun. I nodded. But she was literally here last night. We were all here. She left after us. You two were. Serena, I don't understand. Neither do I. The door closed softly behind her as she backed out, instinctively giving me space. But it was too late. The crack had formed. I wasn't thinking about centerpieces or vows or walking down the aisle anymore. I was thinking about every look, every pause, every maybe I'd brushed off in the last 6 months. And I was starting to realize something I really didn't want to believe. This wasn't just a disappearing act. This was deliberate. And whatever the reason behind that text, I was going to find out. I didn't walk down the aisle. Not yet. Instead, I sat in the bridal suite while someone ran out to stall the ceremony with a vague excuse about a delay with the florals. Guests were still being seated. My mom was circling the room like a windstorm, but I barely heard her anymore. I was too busy staring at my phone, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. Dean's cousin Rachel, who'd volunteered to help with coordination, came in asking if I wanted to start early photos to calm my nerves. I told her no. I lied and said I had a headache. But it wasn't a lie, not really. Something in me was aching. And it wasn't just her absence. It was the text. Kumsun had never been a careless person. She was the kind of friend who sent handwritten thank you cards, who remembered your half-birthday, who once woke up at 3 a.m. to drive to a Walgreens because I needed allergy meds and refused to wake Dean. And now she was ghosting me, with, "Can't make it. Sorry." Not, "I'm so sorry, Serena, something's happened." Not, "I'm at the hospital." Not even, "We need to talk." Just silence. Except, it wasn't silence. Because now, staring harder, I noticed something odd. The message wasn't even from her usual number. It was from a contact saved as Kumsun, yes. But the number was slightly different. Off by a digit. I checked again. Her area code was still 206. But the last 4 numbers, they weren't right. I knew her number by heart. I'd known it since we got matching phones in 10th grade and spent whole nights texting about nothing. This wasn't her. Not really. I sat up straighter. My pulse quickened. What if someone had her phone? What if she'd lost it, or, my stomach dropped. What if something happened to her? I tapped open our message thread. The real one. The one we'd been using for months. Last message, a heart sticker and "Don't forget the eyelash glue," from 9:17 p.m. last night. Totally normal. So why had I gotten this text, from a different number? I tapped the new number and copied it. I called it. Straight to voicemail. No greeting. No name. My chest tightened. I texted. "Who is this? Why are you messaging me from Kumsun's name?" Delivered. But not read. I stared at it for a while. A full minute. Then 5. Still nothing. And that's when I stopped being confused and started being afraid. I opened my laptop. I hadn't planned on using it today. I wasn't going to check email or social media until the honeymoon, but now I couldn't stop myself. I logged into Instagram and typed her name in the search bar. At Cum Writes, her handle. She was a poet. An actual published one. Her latest chapbook had just won some niche award and she'd been scheduled to do a reading in Portland the week after the wedding. Her page loaded. And there was. A new story. Posted 26 minutes ago. My heart caught. The story was nothing. A simple photo. A half-finished matcha latte on a cafe table. Her hand, unmistakable rings and all, resting near a notebook. Caption. Silence can be sacred. What the hell did that mean? I blinked. Rewatched it 3 times. Zoomed in. The timestamp was real. It had gone up after she sent that text. So she wasn't hurt. She wasn't kidnapped. She wasn't lying in a ditch somewhere unable to explain herself. She was drinking a matcha alone. Not answering my calls. Not telling me where she was. Not even bothering to explain why she'd ghosted the biggest day of my life. Suddenly, the bridal suite didn't feel safe anymore. Suddenly, the silence wasn't sacred. It was sharp. That caption, "Silence can be sacred," it wasn't poetic. It was smug. She wanted me to see it. I stood. My reflection in the floor-length mirror looked nothing like a bride. My hair was perfect, veil pinned in place, every inch of me curated for joy. But my eyes told the truth. Rage, confusion, a betrayal so deep it hadn't even fully surfaced yet. There was a knock at the door. "Serena." It was Dean. I froze. I wasn't ready to tell him. Not yet. He didn't wait for permission. The door creaked open and he slipped inside, looking slightly frazzled in his tux, bow tie slightly askew, that little worried crease between his eyebrows I'd learned to read like Braille. "Are you okay? Rachel said you weren't feeling great." I turned, forcing my face to smooth out. "It's nothing," I said too fast. "Just nerves." Dean moved closer. "If you're not ready, we can wait. You know that, right?" I nodded. But inside, something in me had started to calcify. Because now I wasn't thinking about the vows or the venue or the missing maid of honor. I was thinking about what Kumsun wasn't saying. And I was starting to wonder if my best friend had walked out of my wedding on purpose. By the time Dean left the bridal suite, I had made a decision. I was going to walk down the aisle. Not because I was ready. Not because I wasn't hurt. But because I refused to let her absence hijack this day any more than it already had. There would be time for questions. For anger. For heartbreak. But right now, I was going to marry the man I loved, even if the person who was supposed to stand beside me had decided, for reasons I still couldn't comprehend, to disappear without explanation. I slipped my phone into the satin pocket of my robe and took one last look in the mirror. I looked like someone else. Someone polished. Calm. A bride in the final moment before she became a wife. But underneath I felt like a house with the power cut, standing but cold. I changed in silence. The bridesmaids filed back in eventually, whispering nervously, eyes darting to the empty space where Kumsun's dress still hung. I saw the moment Lena realized it wouldn't be worn today. Her lips parted slightly but she didn't ask. No one did. Because no one knew what to say. We adjusted. Reassigned. One of the other girls held my bouquet. The flower girl walked solo. My dad smiled extra wide when he took my arm like he could sense I needed the warmth. The ceremony itself was a blur of motion and soft violin. But the silence inside me remained. The first crack came during the vows. Dean was speaking, hands warm in mine, eyes steady. He said something about how he'd known from the moment we danced at his cousin's engagement party that I would someday be his wife. Everyone laughed softly, sweetly. But I didn't. Because I remembered that night too. But not for the reason he did. I remembered it because that was the first time Kumsun had ever seemed off. It was subtle. So subtle I didn't see it at the time. But now, standing there beneath the flower arch, it came back with cinematic clarity. She'd shown up late. Her smile had been forced. And when Dean and I had kissed on the dance floor, she'd looked away, not in that teasing best friend way. In a sharp way. Distant. Her laughter that night was quieter than usual. I'd chalked it up to work stress. Or maybe wine. Now I wasn't so sure. And then more moments came flooding in, uninvited but undeniable. 2 months ago she bailed on my bridal shower last minute. Said she had food poisoning. No call. Just a message. So sorry, babe. Don't hate me. I believed her. 3 weeks ago she'd forgotten to order the custom cake toppers we designed together. I totally spaced, she said. I've just been scattered lately. I laughed it off. And last week when we went to pick up my veil she barely looked me in the eyes the whole ride home. She kept fidgeting with her phone, texting someone nonstop. I asked if everything was okay. She smiled and said, of course. Just, life. I hadn't thought much of it then. I was too busy. Too wrapped in tool and checklists and seating charts. But now it felt like I'd missed something staring me in the face. The ceremony ended. We kissed. Applause. Confetti. A rush of hands and hugs and camera flashes. Everyone said I looked radiant. I didn't feel radiant. I felt like I was balancing on a rope stretched between two truths. The life I had just committed to, and the one I had shared for decades with a friend who now felt like a stranger. At the reception I kept up the smile. I clinked champagne glasses. I danced. I thanked guests. I posed for photos. But every time someone asked where my maid of honor was, I had to lie. She's sick. She had an emergency. Something with her flight, I'm not sure. The stories piled up like petals at my feet. Soft. Harmless. Pretty. But completely untrue. Dean noticed, of course. He always does. Later, in the garden behind the reception hall, when the music had mellowed and the guests were sufficiently drunk and distracted, he pulled me aside. Okay, he said gently, what's going on? I hesitated. Then I told him. Everything. The text. The number. The story post. The silence. He stood there for a long time, face unreadable. And then, with more caution than I'd ever heard from him, he asked, do you think something happened between you two? It was a fair question. But it landed like a punch. I wanted to say no. Instinctively. Reflexively. But for the first time in my life I couldn't. Because now there were too many cracks. And once you start seeing them you can't unsee them. I didn't know if it was jealousy. I didn't know if it was anger. I didn't even know if it had anything to do with me. But I did know this. Kumsun didn't vanish. He chose to walk away. And somewhere in her silence she was trying to say something. I just hadn't figured out what yet. The morning after the wedding felt like a hangover, not from champagne but from pretending. Pretending everything had been fine. Pretending I hadn't noticed the empty chair at the head table. The silence during the toast where my maid of honor should have spoken. The small flashes of confusion from guests who kept asking, "Wait, where's your best friend? She was here last night, wasn't she?" I didn't sleep much. Dean was out cold beside me in the honeymoon suite, one arm flung across the pillow, hair messy from dancing. I watched him breathe for a while, wondering if I should tell him what I was about to do. I didn't. It wasn't about hiding things. It was about preserving peace. For one more day. Just one. I slipped out of bed at 6:42 a.m., changed quietly and took my phone and keys with me. I wasn't sure where I was going until I was already in the car. Then I realized I was headed to her apartment. The drive across the city felt longer than usual. Seattle was still asleep, fog hanging low over the sound, streets slick from some phantom drizzle that must have passed through during the night. I parked a block away and sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at her building. I didn't know what I was expecting. Her car was there. The small teal Prius we used to joke made her look like a librarian on a road trip. Same dent in the rear bumper. Same crooked rearview mirror. So she hadn't gone far. My stomach twisted. I buzzed her unit. No answer. I waited. Buzzed again. Still nothing. I thought about leaving. Almost did. But something in me, some knot of grief and fury and disbelief, kept me there. I texted. "I'm downstairs. I just want to talk. Please." Delivered. Read. Still nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Just as I reached for my keys to leave, I heard the front door click open. And there she was. Standing barefoot in the building's entryway, wrapped in a faded gray hoodie, hair in a loose knot on top of her head. No makeup. No apology in her eyes. Just exhaustion. Like she hadn't slept either. My first instinct was to throw my arms around her. My second was to scream. I did neither. "Hi," she said. That single word detonated something in my chest. I stared at her. "This is how I find out," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "On my wedding day. From a number that isn't even yours." She looked down at her feet. "I changed phones last night. I was going to text you again this morning." "Oh good. Because that would have made it better." I wasn't shouting. I wasn't crying. That surprised me. She opened the door wider. "Do you want to come up?" I hesitated, then nodded. Her apartment was dim, curtain drawn. The same book pile sat crooked on her coffee table. Mugs on the sink. A half-eaten container of takeout on the counter. All so normal, so familiar it made the sharpness in my chest worse. We sat across from each other on the couch. For a full minute neither of us said anything. Finally I broke the silence. "Why?" She flinched like the word had weight. "I couldn't do it," she said. I couldn't sit there and smile and pretend everything was okay. My heart started thudding louder. "Okay? What wasn't okay, Kumsun? We've been best friends since we were 6. If something was wrong, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you say anything before the wedding?" She looked away. Her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I knew if I told you, you wouldn't marry him." The floor dropped out. I blinked. "What?" She looked back at me now, eyes glassy. "I know things you don't," she said. "About Dean." I stared at her, waiting. But she didn't continue. "You ghosted my wedding because of some vague, unconfirmed drama you suddenly remembered the day of? You could have warned me. You could have come to me. Instead, you humiliated me." "I didn't want to ruin your day," she said. "Or your life. You ruined both." And still I was waiting for her to explain. To say she'd seen him cheating. Or heard him say something cruel. Or maybe she'd misunderstood something. Instead she said this. "I wanted to protect you, Serena. But not like this." I froze. "That's not protection. That's abandonment." She swallowed hard. And for the first time I saw it, guilt. But also something else. Hesitation. He was still hiding something. "Tell me," I said. "I will," she replied. "Just, not today. Please. Give me a little time." I stood. My body was shaking now. "No. You don't get to ask for time. You had years. I needed you yesterday. Not now. Not next week. Yesterday. And with that I left. I didn't look back. Not yet. Because I was starting to suspect the worst. Not just about her. About everything. I didn't cry until I got home. It happened in the shower where no one could hear me. Where the sound of the water could blur the noise in my head. I didn't cry for the wedding. Not for the toast that never happened or the empty chair or even for the picture-perfect moments that now felt like someone else's memories. I cried because something fundamental had cracked. You don't just lose a best friend overnight. You lose her slowly. In missed calls. In half-truths. In looks you ignore because you love her too much to believe they mean what you fear they do. I wrapped myself in a towel, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the bouquet someone had lovingly laid across our dresser. It looked different now. Like it belonged to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. Dean was out running errands, dropping off the tuxes, returning leftover decor. He'd offered to cancel our honeymoon or at least postpone it. I said no. I needed time. But I didn't want distance. Not from him. Not yet. The distance I needed was from her. But ironically, it was her silence I couldn't stop thinking about. And when you sit with a silence long enough, you start to hear the things it's hiding. So I opened my laptop. I went digging. I started with something small. Her Instagram story, the matcha latte one. I zoomed in. Enhanced it. Tried to make out the cafe logo on the cup. Got it. Magnolia Bean. It was a small spot in Capitol Hill. We'd been there once before. Together. Back when she was dating that documentary filmmaker who always quoted Rilke. I pulled up the cafe's tagged posts. Nothing from her. But another user had posted a photo that same morning. A candid shot of the cafe's interior. And there she was. In the background. Sitting across from someone. A man. The photo was grainy and the angle didn't show his face clearly, but I could make out dark hair. A pale blue dress shirt. His posture leaned in, like he wasn't just having coffee. Like they were talking about something important. My pulse quickened. I looked at the timestamp. 10:11 a.m. The exact moment I had been dancing with my father at the reception, trying not to notice the empty chair beside the cake table. She hadn't just skipped my wedding. She had met someone else instead. That someone, I was now sure, was the reason for her silence. And possibly for everything else. I sent the photo to my phone. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into Facebook. Kumsun had all but abandoned hers, but her connections were still there. Mutual friends. People from grad school. Poets, editors, weird academics she used to host readings with. And then I saw it. Buried in an old comment thread. A photo of her at a small book launch 2 years ago. Standing between two people. One was the editor who published her first poem. The other was Dean. I stared at the photo for a long time. I didn't remember him ever mentioning her. I certainly didn't remember her mentioning him. But there they were, not next to each other exactly. But close enough. And the caption? Old friends and new beginnings. That was from her profile. Back before she stopped using it. I clicked through. Another photo. A workshop in Portland. 6 people. Both of them again different sides of the room. But definitely there. It wasn't definitive. It wasn't damning. But it was something. And it was something she'd never told me. I didn't know what it meant yet. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But my mind was already racing ahead of me. Had they met before I knew him? Had they dated? Had they ended badly? Was that what she meant when she said, I know things you don't? Was I marrying someone my best friend had once loved? The possibility hit me like a cold hand on my back. I needed more. So I did the unthinkable. I unlocked Dean's iPad. He'd given me the passcode months ago. We used it to pick honeymoon hotels. It wasn't a violation, I told myself. It was survival. I opened his messages. Most were mundane. Work stuff, group chats, dumb memes from his brother. I scrolled further. Nothing. Nothing suspicious. Until I found one. Not a message but a draft. An unsent one. Still sitting open in his notes app. It was titled simply, If She Ever Finds Out. My hands went cold. I tapped it open. And I began to read. Started like an apology. But not the kind you give when you bump into someone on the street. The kind you write when you're already certain you've destroyed something. Serena, if you're reading this, then I've either finally told you or I've lost the chance to. Either way, I guess this is the truth, or some version of it I can live with. My breath stalled. I stared at the screen. The words were in Dean's voice, every sentence carefully structured like he was building something brick by brick, or maybe trying to build a shield. Before you and I were ever a possibility, there was someone else. You know her. And she knows you. She knew you first. I scrolled down slowly, hands numb. Her name is on your lips more days than not. Come son. You talk about her like she's part of your DNA. And I get it, she is. She's been with you through everything. The grief, the moves, the dreams you were too scared to say out loud. And once upon a time before you and I ever met, she was part of mine too. The air felt thinner in the room. I swallowed hard, but it didn't move. It was years ago. We were both speaking at a small event, some underfunded literary panel in Capitol Hill. I was finishing my MFA, she was already established but not quite known. We talked. We drank. We hooked up. Once. Maybe twice. It wasn't love, at least not for me. But she looked at me like maybe it could be. I didn't. And I never called her back. My fingers tightened around the tablet. Fast forward a year. I meet you. Entirely by accident. And I fall. Hard. You know that part. You lived it with me. But what I never told you was that when you introduced me to your best friend, I already knew her. And she knew me. We both pretended we didn't. It was wordless. Tense. But we did it, for you. I stood up. Started pacing. Each sentence felt like glass under my feet. No matter how I moved, it cut. I thought we could keep the lie. That it would stay buried. That it didn't matter because you and I were real, and whatever she and I were, was not. But it did matter. To her. More than she let on. He kept writing. And I kept reading. Over the years there were moments I saw it crack through. The way she looked at me when you weren't watching. The way her laughter changed when I walked into a room. I thought it would fade. I hoped it would. But it didn't. I think she hates me. And maybe she should. I hurt her. Then I walked into your life like nothing had happened. I've been living inside a secret for 4 years, Serena. I wanted to protect you from it. I told myself it was ancient history. That it wasn't worth digging up. But that was cowardice. She ever tells you, I understand if you leave. If she never does, then maybe this note stays buried. But I needed a version of the truth somewhere. Even if it's just this. There was no signature. Just white space. Like he'd run out of nerve. Or ran out of words. I set the tablet down like it might burn me. And in a way it already had. Suddenly it all made sense. Her disappearing act. Her silence. That trembling, broken voice in her apartment when she said, I couldn't do it. She hadn't just ghosted my wedding. She'd been standing on the edge of a cliff, holding a secret I was never supposed to know. A secret that must have eaten away at her every time she stood beside me, watched me kiss him, plan a life with him. And still, she said nothing. For 4 years. And Dean? He had done the same. Let me build everything on top of a lie neither of them had the courage to confess. I sank to the floor. Not crying. Just still. Because what do you do when the two people you trusted most, the man you married and the woman who was supposed to stand beside you, held hands around a secret and decided you didn't deserve to know? You stop trusting the ground. You start wondering how much of your life was theater. And you ask the only question that matters. What now? I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait until I cooled down. I didn't take deep breaths. I didn't make a plan. I grabbed the tablet, threw on whatever clothes were closest and walked out the door. Dean was at home by then. Folding laundry like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't written a confession he never intended me to see. Like our entire wedding hadn't been sitting on top of a lie. He looked up when I came in. Hey, he said casually. I dropped the tablet on the table. His face changed instantly. He didn't need to ask. You read it, he said quietly. I nodded. Yeah. I did. He closed his eyes like he was preparing for impact. I was going to tell you. When? He opened his mouth. Closed it. I don't know. I married you, I said. I married you thinking you were safe. That you were honest. That I knew the worst and best of you. He moved toward me then stopped himself. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, I said. That makes one of us. The words were too sharp, too easy. I didn't care. What was I supposed to do? He said, voice rising. Tell you the night I proposed? Hey babe, quick heads up. I slept with your best friend once and then ghosted her? What would that have fixed? Maybe nothing, I said. But I would have known. I would have had the right to choose. He ran a hand through his hair. It wasn't serious, Serena. It was years ago. I didn't even remember her name until you introduced us again. Don't lie to me. He flinched. I saw the photos, I said. You didn't just meet her once. You were in the same circles. Same workshops. Same events. You knew her. He sat down hard. Fine. I did. I was shaking now, but I didn't let it show. And all this time, I said, you stood there, holidays, birthdays, double dates, pretending. Did you ever look at me and think, maybe she deserves to know? I was afraid. You should have been. There was nothing left to say between us, not in that moment. So I turned. And I walked back out the door. Because there was one more person I needed to face. Kumsun opened the door like she'd been expecting me. She didn't ask why I was there. She didn't say hello. She just stepped back and let me in. For a moment we stood in silence. Not the awkward kind, the charged kind. Like the moment before a match is struck. I didn't waste time. You loved him, I said. Her eyes widened. Then slowly she nodded. Yes. I swallowed. Before me? Yes. I sat down, suddenly tired. She stayed standing. You told me once you didn't believe in soulmates, I said. I lied. To me. To myself. There it was, the honesty I'd begged for. It tasted bitter. I would have forgiven you, I said almost to myself. If you told me then. If you'd come clean. I know, she said. Her voice cracked. That's the part one can't forgive myself for. Why didn't you? She looked at me like it physically hurt to answer. Because you were happy, she whispered. And I was jealous. And ashamed. And by the time it mattered, it felt too late. My throat tightened. And when we got engaged? I asked. When I told you I was marrying the man you once. What? Loved? I slept with? All of the above. I wanted to scream, she said. But I didn't. I told myself you'd be fine. That you didn't need to know. That he didn't love me. That it didn't matter anymore. And when you stood beside me at the dress fitting, I wanted to disappear. And the night before the wedding? Her eyes filled with tears. I couldn't do it, Serena. I couldn't smile. I couldn't make a toast. I couldn't look at you and pretend I hadn't failed you in every possible way. So you vanished. She nodded. Cowardly, I know. No, I said, standing. Not cowardly. Calculated. Because you didn't disappear to spare me. You disappeared to spare yourself. She didn't argue. He didn't need to. Guess it was true. And now we were here, in the middle of a friendship scorched to the ground. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked the one question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. Do you still love him? She blinked. And for the first time truly hesitated. I don't know, she said softly. But I know I'll never love anyone the way I loved you. It broke something in me, but not in the way she wanted. I nodded. Then you should have protected that love. And I left. There's a strange kind of quiet that comes after destruction. It's not peace. It's absence. Like standing in the center of a burned-down house and realizing you still know where everything used to be, even though nothing's there anymore. That's how it felt. The wedding was over. The lies were out. The confrontations had come and gone. And I was left with space. I didn't go back to our apartment. Not that night. Not the next. I checked into a hotel downtown, just a couple miles from the water. Nothing fancy. A window with a view of gray skies and gulls. I needed neutral ground. A place where my own furniture didn't betray me with memories. Where I could breathe without seeing the ghost of that wedding dress. Dean called. He texted. He didn't try to find me, which I appreciated. The last message I read from him simply said, I'll wait. However long it takes. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish him. But because I didn't know if I wanted to wait for anything anymore. I spent the first day doing nothing. Literally nothing. No social media. No talking. No planning. Just silence. Honest silence. The kind that doesn't pretend to be poetic. The kind that lets grief take up space. And there was grief. Not just for the man I'd married, but for the friend I'd lost. For the version of my life that no longer existed. For the naive, hopeful woman who stood at the altar while the people closest to her carried secrets like thorns hidden in bouquets. I didn't hate them. Not exactly. But I hated the version of me who trusted them completely. That was the hardest part. Because the betrayal, once revealed, becomes part of the timeline. It rewrites the past, not just the present. Suddenly you're looking back and wondering, what else was I blind to? What laughter was forced? What love was borrowed? It's exhausting replaying every scene with new subtitles. I kept waiting for the moment when it would all fall into place. When I'd find the lesson, the meaning, the elegant little closure arc. But all I found was a question. Who am I now? Not a wife. Not really. Not yet. Not someone's best friend. Not the girl who got the wedding of her dreams. Serena. Alone in a hotel room. Still in love with a man who lied. Still aching for a friend who vanished. Still unsure whether either of them deserved a place in the next chapter. But one thing had changed. I wasn't afraid to be alone with myself anymore. On the third night I opened my laptop. I made a new document. No title. And I started to write. Not a revenge story. Not a memoir. Not a breakup letter. Just truth. Truth I didn't need anyone to read. Truth that belonged to me. I wrote about the bridal suite. The silence. The chair that stayed empty. I wrote about the dress. The mirror. The moment my hands stopped shaking and started making fists. I wrote about the lies, not as headlines but as fractures. Hairline cracks that had always been there, spidering quietly beneath the surface. And I wrote about her. Not as the villain. Not as the victim. Just as a girl I once loved like a sister and lost like a storm. By the time the sun rose, I hadn't finished. But I didn't need to. Because I'd remembered something I'd forgotten in all the noise. This was my story. And no one else got to decide how it ended. 2 weeks after the wedding that broke everything open, I invited them both to meet me. Not together. Separately. No drama. No screaming. Just 3 chairs. One in a quiet cafe near the waterfront, one across from me, and one empty until it wasn't. I saw Dean first. He looked thinner. Tired. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes. He stood when I walked in like that would fix something. "Thanks for coming," he said. I sat down. Nodded. "I don't have long." "I know." There was a pause. He let it hang. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," he said finally. "About what I did. About what I didn't say." I looked at him carefully. Dean had always been composed. Measured. But now there was something raw there. Something unguarded. Regret maybe. Or just the heavy recognition that some choices don't come with second chances. "I loved you," I said. "I probably still do." His eyes shimmered a little. "But love," I continued, "is not a pass for silence. You could have told me. She could have told me. I would have hated it, sure. But I would have known. And knowing is power." He nodded. "I was afraid if I told you I'd lose you. And by not telling me?" He didn't respond. Because we both knew the answer. "I'm not here to make you pay," I said. "I'm here because I need to say this out loud with both of us looking at the same truth. I don't trust you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I don't want to build a marriage on top of something that already cracked." Dean blinked hard. "So that's it," he whispered. "I don't know if it's forever," I said. "But it's right for right now." He didn't fight me. Didn't beg. Just sat there breathing through the heartbreak he'd helped build. When I left, I didn't look back. 3 days later I met Kumsun. Same cafe. Different weight in the air. She was already seated when I arrived, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm tea, eyes on the window. When she saw me, she smiled. Small. Pause. I didn't smile back. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Another silence. And then she spoke. Voice low, steady. "I've replayed it all 100 times. 1,000. I was trying to protect you. That was the story I told myself. But that's not what I was doing. I was protecting me. From your pain. From your anger. From the consequences." I nodded. "That's the difference between guilt and grief," I said. "Guilt wants to be forgiven. Grief wants to be felt." She looked up. There was something familiar in her eyes again. Not comfort but recognition. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "I know." I took a breath. "You broke my heart," I said. "And not just by what you did. But by letting me build my life around you while you were holding back the truth." She looked away. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. "I thought if I could be enough of a friend," she said, it would make up for the past. It didn't. I know. We sat for a long time in that ache. The kind that doesn't need fixing. Finally I spoke again. I don't hate you. But I don't want you in my life right now. She nodded. Slow. Like she'd been preparing for it since the day she disappeared from my wedding. If that ever changes, she said softly, I'll be here. I stood. My chair scraped gently against the floor. I hope you will, I said. And I meant it. Because part of healing, real healing, is letting people go without hoping they suffer. It's choosing peace even when pain is an option. That night I walked down to the shoreline near the hotel. The waves were soft. The moonlight hit the water like silver thread. I stood barefoot in the sand, eyes closed, the air cool against my skin. Not thinking. Not deciding. Just being. For the first time in weeks I didn't feel like a broken bride. I felt like a woman who had walked through fire, and now stood in the quiet that came after. Not because everything was resolved, but because I had made the choice. To end the wedding before the marriage could turn into resentment. To draw a line between love and loyalty. To put myself first, not out of ego but out of survival. And that was the story I'd been writing all along. Even if I didn't know it. 3 months later I planted a garden. It was a small plot behind my new apartment, tucked between a weathered wooden fence and a quiet row of townhouses that smelled like laundry and jasmine. I wasn't trying to grow anything fancy. Just lavender. Rosemary. A few stubborn daisies. I'd never gardened before. But I liked the idea of putting something in the ground and not expecting it to bloom overnight. I liked the patience it demanded. The silence. The softness. My days looked different now. I woke up early. Drank my coffee on the porch instead of scrolling through messages. I started writing again. Not about pain, not even about betrayal, but about quiet things. The kinds of thoughts you don't share with anyone unless they really, truly know you. I didn't speak to Dean. He sent one more letter. I didn't open it. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Love doesn't always die with a scream. Sometimes it just goes still. And as for I hadn't blocked her. But I hadn't answered her last message either. It said, I know I lost my place in your life. But I hope you know you'll never lose your place in mine. I read it once. I saved it. And then I turned off my phone and went outside to check the rosemary. It was just beginning to sprout. Tiny green shoots pushing through the soil. Nothing impressive. Nothing Instagram-worthy. But it was alive. And it was growing. Kind of like me.